It's the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 130, and this is your host, Chris Blanchard. My guest today, Chad Wasserman, owns and operates Chad's Organics in Hilo, Hawaii, on the west side of Hawaii's Big Island. After farming up to an acre outdoors, Chad recently moved its entire farm indoors, focusing on 5,000 square feet of production under plastic to provide himself with a living from the herbs and vegetables that he markets to stores, restaurants, and a very small CSA. With over 80 inches of rain each year and no frost or even cool weather to kill off or slow down pests and diseases, Hawaii can be a challenging place to grow vegetable crops. And add to that the cost of bringing fertility inputs over 2,500 miles from the mainland, and you've created a situation that could try the best of farmers. Chad discusses what he's done to ensure that his farming operation succeeds in the face of these challenges. We get into how Chad has developed a market for his products since he started his farm in 2010, dig into how he's changed his production in response to business growth, market development, and weather, and discuss how he's developed a worm-based composting system that brings him 50 to 60 pounds of compost each week with a minimum of effort and off-farm inputs. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is generously supported by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are versatile, maneuverable in tight spaces, lightweight for less compaction, and easy to maintain and repair on the farm. Gear-driven and built to last for decades of dependable service. BCSAmerica.com. And by Vermont Compost Company, founded by organic crop-growing professionals committed to meeting the need for high-quality compost and compost-based living soil mixes for certified organic plant production. VermontCompost.com. And by CoolBot by Store It Cold. You can build an affordable walk-in cooler powered by CoolBot and a window air conditioning unit. Save up to 83% on upfront costs and up to 42% on monthly electrical bills compared to conventional cooling systems at storeitcold.com. Chad Wasserman, welcome to the Farmer to Farmer podcast.
Thank you, Chris. It's an absolute pleasure to be on your show. I've always listened to it, and it's just an amazing, honorable opportunity to be on with a show with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I'd like to start off like we usually do with having you tell us about Chad's Organics there in Hilo, Hawaii. You know, where is Hilo? How much are you growing? What kinds of things are you farming, and how are you selling it?
Sure. Well, we're on the Big Island of Hawaii, on the wet side in Hilo, and it's the only city of significance. Most people think of Honolulu, which is on Oahu, and they have about 1 million people. The Big Island, you could take all the other islands and multiply it by 2.5 times, and that would give you the size of the Big Island. And we only have a population of 140,000, so it's not very population dense, and which I particularly like myself. So we have a 4.5 acre property, actually kind of on the upper slopes of Hilo. And we're at about 1,200 feet elevation. And it's a unique climate because as you go up the volcano, it cools off, quite a bit. And also can be more moisture. But the Big Island has 12 of the world's 14 climate zones. And so the topography is quite diverse. My farm is on a fairly flat piece. It's got some slope to it. I actually only have an acre, or actually even less than that. It's about a 3/4 acre that has been farmed. And now I've actually moved my entire operation indoors into 4 high tunnels. They're 2 structures, but they're gutter connected to make 2 into 1 buildings. And so I have 5,000 square feet of indoor space in these high tunnels that my current operation is all of its production is doing now. I've actually converted my outdoor fields into cover crops now. And I'm actually at a point now where I may build another high tunnel someday, or I may do something else with that outside space, but I found enough production inside to maintain my business that, for a whole host of reasons why I've moved indoors.
Is your farm business a part-time venture for you, or is it a full-time operation?
It's becoming full-time. My wife, we have 3 children, and they're all small. They're starting to grow up now, but I was the main stay-at-home parent, and that's kind of how I got into farming, actually, believe it or not, because I like gardening, and I would kind of share vegetables with friends, and they liked them enough that they said, hey, we'll buy these from you if you can supply us at weekly. And I started out selling to basically we have like a mom's group that we would get together weekly, and there would be a weekly email of where we'd meet up. And so I would send out an email saying, hey, I've got carrots and broccoli and or whatever I would have available. I can bring it to the mom's group. And started out real small, and then I started a CSA, and moved on to selling to a restaurant, and now I actually sell mainly to health food stores. And I'm still the stay-at-home parent, but I've managed to make it into a full-time business, but just through having some additional childcare. But it's been a challenge to manage both, because not only with our farm, but also managing the acreage in Hawaii with nonstop growing and mowing the lawn and maintaining everything. It's a challenge, but I guess the way I would say it is my business, I'm only putting in about maybe 30 hours a week into, and the rest goes to maintaining my property. And some weeks I even work less just because I don't have the time, or I decide we have other family obligations. I just went to the mainland. So I like to keep a balance between life, other things outside of farming, and the farm itself. So I'm actually, in a sense, I'm actually working a little bit less than I used to, because I feel like I've reached a maturity point where all the beds are formed. I've moved into a no-till system for 2 years now, and kind of matured my market, I think, with my customers. And I like where I'm at, because it's I feel like when I'm working, I'm making money. I'm not kind of rolling the dice to see hopefully if it works out. So I've kind of focused and specialized into the crops that I grow.
Now, with having moved indoors, essentially, with that 5,000 square foot of space, why did you choose to do that? You said there were a lot of reasons, but what were the primary reasons behind that?
Well, I have my first high tunnel was in a USDA equip grant that I was luckily to get through the USDA, and they paid a fair amount of the cost and the additional I made up. And I noticed that my yield, the quality, was just so much better than what I could do on the outside. And not only that, one big limitation of farming in Hawaii, or especially in the windward side, is we can have some really intense rain. I mean, we can get Hilo averages about 120 inches a year on a good year. I would say at minimum about 80 a year, and we are up slopes, so we get even more. And it's challenging when you get that much rain to maintain quality. And not only that, I guess the comfortability of working indoors is just so much more pleasant. I never have to worry about the weather. When it comes to weed management and crop turnover and pests, and actually probably pests would probably be maybe the first thing to talk about, because being that in the tropics, we have just immense pest pressure, because there's no winter kill, and we're humid. We have just every pest you can imagine, and we also have a health risk with slugs. They carry a rat lung parasite that can be a problem if you eat raw produce. And for all those reasons, I decided to just go purely indoors, and I've actually sealed my greenhouse off to the outdoors, and I've literally have taken composite wood and I buried it in the soil and connected that to insect screening that I used outdoor trim stainless steel screws. So nothing's getting in unless it's so, like mites or something might be able to get in, but it's, I've basically drastically increased my pest prevention moving indoors. It just took away so many headaches.
I would think that farming indoors in Hawaii, it would just be hot. Hot, hot, hot.
That's what a lot of people think, and it depends on your design on your greenhouse or high tunnel. I went with the really high walls. So my first tunnel is 6 feet high, and there's the sides are just insect screening, so you get really good airflow through that insect screening. And my second high tunnel, I actually made even higher. I mean, the centers go up to 16 feet. And I actually raised up the columns with slips. And the higher you make the structure, the cooler it's going to be because that airflow is going to be constantly moving. And my poly covering on my new structure is a glacial, I think they call it glacial ice or something. So it actually blocks some of the more damaging UVs, and it actually is cooler inside than the outside. It's really good technology to use. So I guess the combination of my locality and my greenhouse design, haven't had a problem with heat so much. And I'm even growing, like spinach and, Salanova lettuce on the inside. Now, in these warmer months, I am starting to experiment with using some shade cloth inside the high tunnel using, kind of like those low hoops, bending EMT, similar to what people might do on the outside, having your low tunnels with remade, except I'm using shade cloth on the inside to get those temperatures down. And I've been really happy with the result of that using that shade cloth in these hotter months for that purpose.
Now, what kind of crops are you specializing in? Because I imagine that having shifted from outdoors to indoors, you've probably changed your crop mix quite a bit.
A lot. So I used to have a much bigger CSA where I say big CSA, but 25, 30 members, wasn't that big, but now I'm down to just 15 members, down to 3, and it's a much smaller package that I'm offering now with more limited selections. And so I used to try to do a lot more stuff, and I don't miss those days, honestly. You're trying to grow so many different crops, and they all have their ins and outs, and you have to buy so much different seed, and I didn't feel like I was totally utilizing all of the yields because I was selling it to the CSA, but yet I didn't have another outlet at that time to sell to the stores. I was selling to a restaurant, so I had that to some extent, but I started to have a lot of success with the health food stores here, and I started to specialize about 2 years ago when I decided to start bringing stuff indoors. And actually, it's been within the last year that I've moved 100% indoors. So as far as crops I grow, I grow a lot of basil, a lot of fresh basil. That's becoming one of my most profitable crops. Salanova lettuce is probably my number 2 crop, and sometimes I sell more of that than basil, along with the salad greens to make a mix. So I'll grow tatsoi, purple mizuna, and let's see, I grow spinach, cherry tomatoes, and I do like a petite baby kale as well indoors. I was pretty big into cucumbers. I've cut back a bit, but I may get back into that a little bit more. But I've really kind of cut it down to those 4 or 5 crops to simplify my life, and I've just found them a lot more profitable when I compare the amount of input and labor versus my return. I used to grow a lot of carrots, and there's great demand for carrots. I could sell every single carrot, but it required a lot more space, and it was a lot more work to grow them and process them and wash them. And um, I compared like the amount of space that I needed for carrots and the amount of labor versus like basil. And I mean, basil just blew it away in terms of profitability. So, I've really kind of specialized to make my life easier. And, I guess when you find your niche and you find what customers want and you kind of develop your customer base, and, the demand's been good for those products, and the turnover time is quick. So for all those reasons, I've been pretty happy with my crop selection. I mean, I used to grow more like zucchini and corn and just some more outdoor crops, but a lot of it, I eliminated a lot of that stuff just to do with my schedule. Like I said, I'm not working full time at it. On the rare week I might, but if I need to utilize my time to its maximum efficiency and profitability, and I've found the crops that I mentioned to be the winners, that maybe I could make money off of squash or carrots and that kind of thing, but I can't fit it in. It doesn't measure up to those other 4 or 5 crops that I'm growing indoors. Just when you analyze your return and the cost of input, just hands down, it just makes sense for me to grow those other varied crops, on the outside or inside. So, been really happy with that.
As you've shifted away from the CSA, both shrinking it and eliminating some crops from that crop mix, where have you found a market for your produce?
Well, there's a great health food store chain here called Island Naturals, and they have 3 stores on the island. I live about 8 miles away from their Hilo store, and that's kind of their flagship store. And they sell the most of my product, but they do have 2 other stores, and they have this great service they offer farmers, that if you have products that the other produce managers want, they'll deliver it for you on certain days. So, I have my schedule set up based upon those delivery days. So for example, for Kona, I just dropped off a big basil order because they're going to deliver it tomorrow. And it's been a great partnership because I'm not delivering. I'm not driving. It takes about an hour and a half to go to their store. It take me about 2 hours one way. So, I mean, not to say I wouldn't do it if I had to drive, but I sure am glad I don't have to. They save me a lot of time and money. And so there's another health food store, Abundant Life, that they sell some, but not like the Island Naturals stores have been for me. So they're a very busy store. And yeah, I mean, just through those stores alone, I've really been able to increase my sales through them, and to kind of phase back to CSA. And I was actually going to drop it altogether, but I had some just old time hardcore customers convinced me to keep it going. So, I decided just to, and it's, I do want to have a little diversity, and it makes me a little nervous to depend on one store. So I am looking into maybe approaching some other stores selling basil and salad greens. But at this point, I've been really happy with the amount of business I'm getting from them.
And when you talk about dropping off a big order in that situation, what does a big order look like on your farm?
I'll drop off like a $200 order of basil. I sell them in clamshells, like a compostable clamshell, and they're about a 5-ounce package of fresh, really beautiful large leaf basil. And I'm starting to do a smaller one just to offer customers who may not want such a big portion size. And so that'll be like 30 large containers along with 20 smalls. So
Okay.
and I kind of make my day through scheduling it through which store, the Hilo store I can drop off whenever I want to. The other stores I kind of have to align it with their delivery days, and and then I just match that with my schedule. And like I said, I'm the stay-at-home dad, so I'm often picking up my kids with my orders in the back of my minivan, and I'm taking them with me to drop off the orders after school. And then we're coming home, and then I'm doing the whole stay-at-home dad thing. And I don't know what other job I could do where I could do that, or I'd have to hire childcare to pick up my kids and take them to their activities and do all the things that you have to do as a parent.
Now, are you the only person working on your farm?
I am. My wife she is not interested, and she works a nurse at the hospital here. And I've had a couple people kind of, intern, but honestly, Chris, I like working for myself. I don't really enjoy managing people. I used to be a manager at a retail at an Office Max store, and didn't really love it. And I guess at some point I may have to hire somebody, but I've made it work, working part time and just making things efficient through tools or equipment, or just like we were talking about before, picking the products that that are the most profitable, that I feel like I don't have to hire people at this point. And it gets more complicated because you got to get a workers' comp. You have to train these people. And at this point, I'm just not ready to. I probably could. I probably could afford to hire somebody at least part time, but at this point, I just don't want to.
And no reason to do it if there's not a reason to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Some people are perplexed that I don't, but I like working independently. I like to work at my own schedule. I don't really want to have to train people and manage them and have personnel issues. And a lot of people do. What's popular here is they have woofing, which I'm sure they have in the mainland, where someone lives on your farm, and then their labor is what pays their stay. And I've heard some bad stories about that. And then they're living on your property, and that's a little more intimate, with your family. And I've heard, they may not be really that motivated to work because they're not getting paid cash or a paycheck. And so I've kind of steered clear of that, even though I've actually had many offers of people that want to come and work and learn. And you know what? I just haven't been able to fit that into my schedule. And I'm kind of selfish with my time. I want to do whatever I want to do on the particular day, and I don't really want to have to work that out with an employee, honestly.
What do the economics of farming in Hawaii look like? How does that work out? I've always thought of Hawaii as being a fairly expensive place to live. And of course, I mean, some of that is because supplies are coming from the mainland. Can you talk to me a little bit about what those economics look like for you?
Sure, it's true. It's a very expensive place to live. Land here is pretty expensive. I mean, the Big Island has the most affordable land. The other islands, it's really bad. I mean, if you're starting out farming, you have to either lease land, and I think you can probably find some land where you could lease it affordably. But eh, even that, that creates problems in itself. I don't know how I would farm the way I do and not live on my land because one big issue here I've heard of is a lot of ag theft. The papaya farmers, they get a lot of their produce stolen or equipment stolen, and so it's nice to live on your farm to be able to oversee everything. And just I don't want to commute to my farm. That's why I want to farm, because I want to live where I work and not have that hassle of having to drive to farm. Yeah, equipment is, I mean, it's not, it's, we definitely pay a premium. Supplies, inputs. And we do have a big agricultural distributor of, fertilizer inputs, crop production services. And I mean, actually, I've compared the prices to the mainland, and it's actually not too bad. We maybe pay a 10% premium for, a bag of oyster shell, or, composted chicken manure, or, whatever input you want to talk about. So that's not too bad. A lot of products you might want to order online, you kind of have to finagle and say, hey, you got free shipping, but you don't include Hawaii. So can you work a deal with me? And, and the cost of building your farm is definitely, it's expensive, but, the cost of produce is also higher. So, and that's what sort of interested me in the economics of it, because I was looking at all these products that were shipped in from California and Mexico. And my thought was, well, how do they make the economics of that work? Because you can't put that on I mean, some things you can put on a ship, you can put melons or whatever. But when we're talking about solid products, fresh products that spoil fast, and basil, I had a feeling I could compete, because if I can get the same price that the store is or the wholesale price that maybe they're paying, or just even through the CSA, to make it seem like a good deal, because if you buy that organically, you're going to pay a lot more. So the retail price is pretty high, so that does help to offset those higher costs that we have living out here. And so, and that kind of gives me a market advantage, honestly, because that California and Mexican organic produce, they have to air freight that. That's really, really expensive. I mean, I think sometimes they don't even make money on it. It's just because they have to offer it. And as I was saying, the local health food store here, they do support local farmers. And, I've been able to get good prices from them and have a good steady demand. And so I have been able to make it work financially. But it's definitely been real challenging. I mean, I would, it's taken me a while to get to where I'm at, for sure. Just to find out what works, and find your niche and develop the methods and techniques, and to get the market for that product that you can make profitable. It's definitely been a journey. I mean, there's been times where you wonder, well, why am I doing this? I'm not, I'm paying a lot more than I'm making. So those first few years those were difficult.
So when did you start farming?
Well, I officially started in 2010, and it was very small. Like I said, it was just this very small CSA, and that was kind of, sprung up through this mom's group that we belonged to with our kids. And my kids were really, I just had one child at that point, and we've added two others. And so it was very part-time at first, and it kind of got a little bit easier as I could maybe afford to hire a babysitter, and my wife's schedule got a little bit better, so she was able to help out with the childcare a bit. And so it technically I'm technically, on my 7th year, I guess, but it was far from full time in the beginning.
How long did it take you to develop your farm into something that was a profitable venture?
Well, at first my main goal was to, we didn't want to use any of my wife's income to put into the farm. So I pretty much had to, reinvest, everything that I was earning. Just to give a year exactly I guess it was around 2014 when, um, you know, I would say I got to a point where my income was above the investments that I was making into the farm. And so now I would say really actually until 2015 where I was, contributing to our household and, paying for bills and childcare and the mortgage and all that. So it took a while to, and I probably went a little bit overboard on my equipment purchases. But, so be it. I mean, the way I looked at it is I didn't want to hire people, but if a tool or a piece of equipment would make my job faster and easier, I was going to buy it. And, the way I did that was instead of getting, some kind of loan or something like that, I just took out 0% interest credit cards where, you get 12, 18. I even had ones that were like 21 months, that you have 0%. So if I had to make a big purchase for an implement or, or my greenhouses or whatever, I would put it on these 0% interest cards and then just with knowing that I'm going to pay it all off before it's going to become prime interest. So, that was you have to have good credit to do that, but that really helped to finance a lot of stuff.
So for managing your 4.5 acres, what kind of equipment have you invested in?
Well, I have a BCS tractor, the 853, whole bunch of implements. I mean, I've got a finishing mower in that I don't use anymore. I've got a tiller I don't use anymore, a R2 Power Harrow. I've got a rotary plow and a flail mower. And now the thing that I use the most actually is my Carvaggi shredder. And then I in 2015, or actually, no, it was late 2014, I bought a John Deere subcompact tractor, 1025R, 24 horsepower. It's got a really nice, powerful mid-mount deck. So I do a lot of my main mowing with that, and it's nice. It's got a backhoe on it and a loader. And so that's how I maintain most of the land. I also have a riding, John Deere residential mower just for getting through the small spaces along the fence line and really tight spaces. And so but the John Deere subcompact tractor has been my main way to upkeep my property. I mean, honestly, I don't really use it a whole heck of a lot on the farm business, except for maybe moving stuff or, moving some materials or compost or moving, crop residue or something like that around. With the loaders, primarily what I would use it for on the farm. But, so, I have a fair amount of equipment when it comes to that.
As you moved your production indoors, how did your production change? I mean, you say you weren't using the tractor in your fields outside in any case. So, and you've talked about making this change to doing a no-till version of farming. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you've got that set up?
Sure. That's a kind of a interesting story. I used to till. I mean, I had like I said, I had the rotary plow. I made with our heavy rainfall, you have to have raised beds. You can't farm without them because you need that water to drain through your walkways. So I did do all that traditional tillage. made all my fields, I made my beds, and I was tilling, and I kind of realized, I'm kind of pulverizing the soil here, and there was getting a lot of press about the power harrows, so I did get one of those, the R2 power harrow from Earth Tools, and while that is a good implement, and it is certainly way less tillage, um, you know, I still found that it was harming my soil life because I would make a pass with it, and I would see a bunch of earthworms kind of bouncing up and down, and the birds come, and it was like a smorgasbord for them. Um, but I'm going off on a tangent. But we had an El Nino event in 2015 in Hawaii where we had some really extreme weather. In a matter of about 5 months, in the summer of 2015, at my elevation, we literally had 200 inches. I mean, we would have 10-inch rain days. 1 week you might cumulatively get like 40 inches. And you can't till when you have that kind of rain. Your soil will literally, it'll just wash down. And so, I was kind of forced to for that weather event. And my system kind of crashed, honestly. Everything was going really well, and suddenly we had this just intense weather event where with the rainfall, and we had some really intense heat for Hawaii, and noticed that like some pathogens like root knot nematodes that I hadn't been seeing before, and so I just kind of did a lot of research, and just kind of went back to the board and looked into a lot of these no-till systems, and I started to learn about the soil food web from Elaine Ingham, and understanding the complexity that exists in the soil, and how tillage it really destroys your soil organisms and actually promotes the pathogens that you don't want in your soil. And a few others. I don't know if you heard of Gabe Brown. He really fascinating farmer that has a no-till system for many, many years. Some other sources, Singing Frogs Farm. They were all successfully doing no-till, and that was really interesting to me because just from a logistical point of view, I couldn't till because I was going to lose soil if I did. And so I started experimenting with that. And, definitely it's a learning process. It's not just going to magically happen at once to make no-till work. I started doing it on the outside and on the inside, and noticed that a lot of small but improvements that were really helping. The big improvement was just not losing soil when it rained. That was a huge improvement. Started seeing a lot more worm life, and less weeds. A lot less weeds, actually, because I guess I wasn't turning them over to expose all those fresh weeds into the, to expose into the air to germinate. And, uh, everyone thinks you have to kind of like rotate to avoid the pests and diseases and the nutrient, lack of nutrients from growing the same crop. And I found actually if you have a good healthy soil, or have a good set of healthy organisms in your soil to function properly, rotation becomes irrelevant, actually. Because like I said, with 5,000 square feet, that's not a lot of space, really. And so not having a lot of crops to grow, and I work mainly on transplants. I do some direct seeded stuff, but mainly transplants. And the no-till has really been able to make my system work with the limited space and the limited crop types because of the soil health, because of the lack of diseases that you would probably experience in a tillage system. And not only that, you just when you till your soil, you really are just destroying that aggregate. Where I live, I actually have really good soil. I'm really blessed at it. It's a pretty heavy clay soil, but just to have soil is actually kind of rare in the Big Island. A lot of places just are pure lava rock. I noticed that the pests became much less of a problem with the no-till system. There's just a lot of benefits actually if you can make a no-till system work. And like I said, it does not happen overnight. It takes time to transition to that. But I've been really, really happy with. In fact, I don't. If I didn't discover no-till, I don't know I would be farming in the way that I am because the ability to the fact that I don't have to drag even a walking tractor into my greenhouses is just very beneficial. You don't have the fuel, you don't have the exhaust. When you and I used to take a BCS tractor into the high tunnel to till, but it is really like maneuvering the machinery around there, and then you're kind of when you do that, you've kind of actually you've destroyed your if you have your bed kind of permanent bed system and you're tilling, you're never going to keep that nice shape. It's all you're going to a lot of soil is going to fall off the sides, and you're going to get a hard pan below, and it's just worked out well for me. I do use landscape fabric in the system just for weed management, and also actually I find it good for soil health because you're always keeping it covered. It's an instant way to cover up your soil with the landscape fabric. And I burn holes through it to put my lettuce through or basil through or whatever, cherry tomatoes. And I'm even experimenting and finding quite success in using white ground cover with black underneath, burning holes, and it kind of melds it together. And the white is real beneficial because it keeps your soil temperatures cool. It bounces that light off. And not only that, it seems to, any insects that would get in your high tunnel, they get really confused by that because all that sunshine bouncing back up. I found that, that is a good deterrence actually to any type of insect issue. And when I turn over my crops and I pull out my, the lettuce stem core in the bottom, because I like to pull it out. I don't want, I keep as much root mass as I can, but I want to turn that over right away. So I'll pull out all the, the whatever plug was in there, the soil block plug, and I've got a perfectly fresh, clean bed. No weeds, and that works well in no-till system because you can, if your soil is good, you can direct seed right into that, or if you need to add amendments, and then you put your landscape fabric back over it to go on to the next crop, and so you can really, grow a lot of crops in the same space, continuously. So that's how I'm able to maintain a pretty high production level in a small space.
So are you doing any bare soil production that falls into that no-till category?
I am. I like I said, so say if I turn over a lettuce bed or basil or whatever that had the landscape fabric, I've got a nice clean bed, and I do baby greens such as baby kale or tatsoi and mizuna, and I'll direct seed right into that because that's a quick crop. I don't have a lot of weed pressure inside, but I'm sure if I kept them uncovered, stuff's going to blow in because I'm not, with the tropics, and we have these trade winds that are constantly blowing weed seeds all over the place. I'm sure I would have more weeds if I didn't keep them covered. So I will do a direct seeded bed of baby greens, but with the brassicas, if there are any weeds, they outgrow them and you won't even see them until you make your first cut. And it's pretty minimal. I mean, once in a while, I might have to, just because I don't want anything to go to seed, and, I might go through there and nitpick it. But, I don't do a lot of weeding. I mean, I would say I do maybe 30 minutes a week weeding. I don't like weeding. That's just not something I particularly enjoy. I mean, you have to do it, but I find prevention is the best method for that. I do a little bit of flame weeding too, but not very much. Not very. If I'm in a situation where I can still flame weed it, then I might go ahead and do it. But I don't do a lot. I don't do a lot of that.
I think it's interesting you talk about the high tunnels as actually keeping the weed seeds out. That's not something I would normally think of.
Well, because like I've said, I've kind of barricaded them where there's no open access. So I've used it's a pretty expensive insect screening that, it's kind of like a mesh, like I don't know if it's nylon or what it actually is, but it's extremely resistant to tearing or anything like that. I've had my first high tunnel is 5 years, virtually no tears in it, and there might be a little bit of blowing through. I'm sure some gets through, but the screen seems to block a lot of that of those weed seeds from blowing in because there's not much you can really do about wind-borne weed seed. I mean, I'm kind of on the edge of Hilo. I'm not like right in the city, but there's enough stuff around me that I'm sure there's a lot of weed seeds blowing in the wind. But going indoors has really helped that situation because you can control the moisture, and there just seems to be less soil disturbance that I definitely prefer indoors versus outdoors. With that, Chad, I think we're going to stop here. Take a quick break, get a word from a couple of sponsors, and then we'll be right back from Chad Wasserman of Chad's Organics in Hilo, Hawaii. Perennial support for the Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are real farming equipment for real farmers. And with PTO-driven attachments like rototillers, flail mowers, rotary plows, power harrows, log splitters, snow throwers, even a utility trailer and a new water transfer pump, you've got the tools you need to get jobs done across the farm and across the homestead. On my own farm, we went through a number of so-called solutions for mowing and tilling before we finally got smart and bought a BCS. Even though we owned a four-wheel tractor to manage our 20 acres of vegetables, the BCS tackled jobs that we simply couldn't do with the larger machine, from mowing steep slopes and around trees to working in our high tunnels. Plus, they're gear-driven for years of dependable service. Check out bcsamerica.com to see the full lineup of tractors and attachments, plus videos of BCS in action. The podcast is also brought to you by Store It Cold's CoolBot. Way back in 2000, which was the year I started Rock Spring Farm, the manager of the local food co-op complained that the lettuce from local producers lasted for days in her cooler, while the lettuce from California lasted for weeks. What's that about 2,000 miles fresher? I later found out that none of the local growers had a walk-in cooler. 17 years later, this is still the number one complaint I hear from produce buyers. You have to get your produce cold. The difference between now and then is that now there's CoolBot. You can build an affordable walk-in cooler powered by a CoolBot and a window air conditioning unit, saving up to 83% in upfront costs and up to 42% on monthly electricity bills compared to conventional cooling units. Use the code FTF at checkout to double your CoolBot warranty at no charge. StoreItCold.com. All right, and we're back with Chad Wasserman of Chad's Organics in Hilo, Hawaii. So, Chad, Hawaii, right? I mean, I went to Hawaii a couple of times when I was young, and I don't remember eating a whole lot of vegetables, and especially the kinds of things you're talking about. It seems like a very mainland crop mix. What is the market like there for organic vegetables? I mean, both on the buying side as well as on the production side. Is there a lot of market farming going on in Hawaii? There's a lot of small farmers. There's not a lot of big organic farms. I mean, in fact, there's really no real big organic farm. So there's a lot of small producers. There's not a lot of certified organic vegetable farms. There's a lot of certified organic coffee farms, or some other fruits. Because what were we well known for? Papayas, pineapple is pretty much out of business. Except for some local markets. Yeah, a lot of produce is imported here. Which I think is kind of a shame. Because we're so far away. And that's what kind of motivated me to look into retailing at health food stores because a lot of it was imported. I knew that like I was talking about before, with the cost of importing those products and having to air freight them, I knew I could compete as long as I could get similar pricing to what they're paying for the imported produce. And I would say it's changed a lot from probably when you were here. There's definitely a local food movement. A lot of people, are really into their health. There are a lot of people that have moved here. They want to eat healthy. They want local produce. So I think the demand is there. Now, the logistics of making a business work where you can produce a product that's profitable, is that's definitely not easy to do. And my island's a bit limited because our population is kind of small. You know, the other islands, like Oahu has 1 million people on it, and they're importing a lot of their produce. And the big farms that they do have are certainly not organic, and they are supplying the stores and the some of the restaurants. I would say, if, I don't know what the ratio would be, but it is becoming more local. But for me, I've tried to create my own brand. So I make my own labels. My background was I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I went to art school, the Art Institute of Chicago, and I did web design for a while. So I knew how to do graphics, and so I was able to make my own color labels to get that USDA organic label on it. So people associate that with a brand, and I found that when I put my own label on my products, that really increased sales as opposed to just having something generic or, no label at all. I think people, and so that allowed me to, add on other products with my brand. I think that creates, kind of customer loyalty that you can keep strong sales going. And I've even developed relationships with the produce managers and even just employees that work in the produce department. And I see them on a regular basis, and I have a really good rapport with them. And they even tell me that they recommend my products to their customers because they know it's a good quality, as opposed to making kind of a more of a commodity product. Really matter where it comes from or no name. That's not the kind of farming I want to do, because, I want it to be unique, stand out for its quality, something that people can remember when they go back to the store to go buy. So that's worked out well for me. I've actually never done like a farmer's market, even though we have a really well-known farmer's market in Hilo. I found that a lot of people are just selling the same stuff. And like, yeah, maybe the people that go there, they might find a vendor they like or whatever, but the prices weren't that great, I found. And then you're competing with all these other people, and you're spending your time sitting there at the farmer's market when I'd rather be farming myself or doing something else besides being at a farmer's market. And that was why I started the CSA, because I wanted to farm. I didn't want to stand at a farmer's market or having to worry about the marketing aspect to it. In the beginning, the CSA worked out good for me because I could get prepaid, and the logistics of them picking up was pretty easy. I mean, I could do it all in one day or even sometimes just half a day where the CSA would be dropped off by, say, lunchtime, and then I'm pretty much done. I guess if you can find your customers that are willing to be loyal and seek your products out, I think you can make it work. It's taken me a while to find that niche and develop my skills and just all the different, type of skill sets that farming requires to manage your business to make a good quality product that people want to buy. I mean, there's so many nuances, to that. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like maybe anywhere else, as far as like there's quite a big demand for organic, healthy produce. And, I guess through me making my own brand, my own label that people identify with, that I've gotten that customer loyalty where the sales have remained really well, and sometimes certain times of the year, I can't meet the demand because maybe it's because there's enough to it. Like in the wintertime, it is just slamming busy. It slowed off a little bit in the summer, but not much. I mean, in fact, I don't even mind because I want to work on other projects. So it's been good for me. I've seen other people struggle where I think they get excited to farm here because you can kind of idealize what that might be like because we don't have frost, we don't have a winter. And but yet we have a whole other slew of issues that you might not experience on the mainland. I think people get disgruntled fast because they're trying to do too much at one time and they're encountering way too many problems, and so they give up. I've seen a few people do that just personally, and I've heard a lot of other stories about people trying to make a farm business here and they decide not to do it because there's just too many problems that they're encountering, and it's not profitable, and they do something else. Well, first of all, there's quite a bit of pest pressure without our winters. I mean, we have every insect under the sun. I like, for example, just like growing cover crops, if you seed your bed, these birds come and they will literally eat most of your seed, where you might get 10-15% germination because the birds have eaten the rest of it. I found a way to overcome that is you got to put some kind of cover on it. So I'll put the insect screening on top of the soil. That's just one example, but insect pressure, disease pressure, crop failures, heat stress, yeah, a lot of crop failure. I've seen. There was one particular friend who he was kind of going at it really ambitiously, and he just had so much crop failure that it was just so he was so disgruntled by it, but he just quit because he wasn't getting enough return on his input into the business, and it just wasn't working. So I think maybe two people don't have a market ready. They kind of go into it and start doing some things, and maybe they sell at the farmers market, or they're trying to sell at the restaurants, and that it's kind of tough to do that because you're going to be putting a lot of time into it, and your return on that labor isn't going to be so great in the beginning, at least. I mean, restaurants, there's definitely a market there. And I used to work with a big restaurant here, Hilo Bay Cafe. They worked well for me for a while because they had a really good chef that really pushed local products, and I liked working with him. And now he moved away, and then they had a new chef come in who kind of nitpicked at the prices and was always trying to negotiate with me to lower the price. And, I just said, that's enough. I'm getting a good price from the health food store. I'm done nitpicking. You're charging 30 a plate. Why are you trying to downsize the price by $2 a pound or whatever it was? Finding that market is key. And I think maybe going into it too big to think you're going to suddenly get all this income without any problems, well, that just isn't going to happen if you don't have the experience in established market. I think one reason why I was been able to make this work is because I went into it very small and made incremental changes to gradually accommodate more demand. It was never too big where I couldn't handle it or had, problems where I couldn't manage that to still make an income, from farming. I don't know. Maybe I love doing it. So I just kept at it. And I don't know what else to say about that.
We talked earlier about the challenge of getting supplies in Hawaii. And I think, one of the things that I would think would be the hardest would be getting things like fertilizers and soil amendments, because they're heavy, and if they aren't heavy, they're bulky. What are you doing for fertilizers and soil amendments there?
Right. No, that's a really good question. And that's a big challenge here because we have to pay more expensive freight charges. We're 2,500 miles away from the West Coast. So, I did do some cover cropping on the outside. And, even for that, I had to repay ridiculous prices. I would pay more for the shipping than the cost of the seed often. So that was one way. I don't rely on that anymore. I do purchase inputs, whether it be like oyster shell, we do crab meal, azomite. And I guess I'm on a smaller scale. And the profitability of my products are such that I can purchase those inputs and still have a positive cash flow. But one of the biggest improvements that I made on my farm was being able to make my own worm compost. I got really interested in making compost when I learned about the soil biology and how much of a critical role that plays into preventing diseases and pests and improving your fertility. And you can't purchase commercial compost here. Like there's no truck deliveries. There's really no one making it to purchase it commercially. With our rainfall, I can't just have an open compost pile because you get a lot of leaching if you're having rain. And we also have like these fire ants here that are attracted to compost piles. So I wanted something really contained. And, I looked into vessel composting, and that was really expensive to have that kind of structure purchased here, without even thinking about the shipping. So I really got into learning about vermicomposting. And I purchased a worm wigwam and used that in our carport in a covered structure. So I produce about 50 to 60 pounds a week of worm compost. That's really, really high quality worm compost. And that gets used in my seed starting mix, as well as directly into all the beds, into my high tunnels. And that actually has reduced my input costs at least by 50%. And I think I'm incrementally having to reduce that even more, actually, or the input cost of buying off-farm input products through using more worm compost. Because the advantage is with your traditional compost pile, you have to turn it. You have to aerate it. You let it reach a certain temperature, and then you turn it, and then you have to wait a certain amount of days. Well, the beauty of worm compost is the worms are doing all that turning and aeration for you. And so they become little willing workers on your farm, and they're always reproducing. It's amazing. I'm amazed when I do go through my worm compost and I sift it through, and there's like all these baby worms, and there's cocoons, and they're really productive. And so through kind of trial and error, I've developed a system where I do use coconut coir, so I do buy that, but that is relatively inexpensive compared to what it would cost for me to buy a bag of worm compost. I mean, I would have to do the math for you, but I go through a bale of coconut coir, maybe every other week or something like that. And then I take all my farm waste, kitchen waste, but mainly farm waste from, called leaves and stems and, crop residue. And what I do actually is I shred that in a BCS Carvaggi shredder, and on a regular basis, say I guess maybe 5 times a week, I put a small layer of that shredded fresh vegetable waste along with the coconut coir, and I keep on layering that, and the worm population has grown where, they've eaten through everything within a day or two. It is astonishing how rapidly, they will consume the organic matter if it's prepared properly. And I'm even changing the system now where I'm going to pre-thermal compost some of that material and then feed it to the worms, because you do get a bit of a thermal heat effect if you apply enough of that, and you don't want to overdo that. You can cause a lot of problems. So in small amounts, it's okay, but I'm actually starting experimenting where you go through a thermal heat process, and once it's cooled down, then you feed that material to the worms, and then they process it, all of that, into their worm compost or worm poop. And so, through a kind of like a turning, tumbler compost that I'm constructing on my farm with, using wood posts and basically just garbage bins on using a metal pipe to turn it. So, but that's a new thing and I've had pretty good success just feeding it this raw vegetable material with the coconut coir. And, at the bottom, it has a winch that you turn and you collect all your material at the bottom. And it is just super rich, the just deepest, darkest, smells like the forest floor. And all the microbes that worm compost has is rich, diverse, and the stuff you could buy doesn't have that because they're using like dairy manure and one feed source. That's the only, for my seed starting mix, I use the worm compost and like just a sunshine mix number 3, and maybe like at a 15% ratio of worm compost to the potting soil. And I do use a little bit of like the powdered azomite just to get a kind of a mineral spectrum. Make sure I've got all my minerals available. And my transplants are just, uber healthy, especially when I compare it to what before I had the worm compost. I mean, the lettuce starts I have are just, they are just bulletproof. So when I go to transplant, it's a quick turnover because I've got this beautiful, healthy transplant from my worm compost that allows my system to have a fast turnaround and a very healthy plants. And, the healthier you can make your plants, it just makes your job easier because, when you're processing and you're, kind of going through your leaves, and I'm a perfectionist. So if I see one little munch of a mite or something or whatever on a leaf, I discard it because I don't want customers they're paying a premium, so I won't want that to be in their mix. But I've noticed with the worm compost, I call so much less, and that makes your job easier when you're processing, and washing and sorting your vegetables and, packing, when you don't have much insect damage, it just makes it easy, and it makes it more profitable because you're pulling less product and you're selling more. You have this healthier product that has very little or no insect damage on it, no disease. And, I think the customers notice that. And that's why I've been able to establish a good market and, demand is because my products are, they're tasty. There's not the insect damage, and there's a certain level of quality that I think lacks in the imported products or my competition. So, I don't want to brag or anything, but I feel like the key to that success has been the no-till system, and the worm castings. Those two things have really um, powered or provided my system with a uber healthy, visually beautiful product that is going to outsell either the imported product or the local competition. I've had times where the produce manager tells me they had some of their imported solid mix go bad because no one was buying it next to mine. And I think that goes a lot into taking that attention to detail and having a healthy product that doesn't have any insect or it has a good flavor to it. So customers know that when they and taste it when they buy those products.
Absolutely. So I'm really interested in the system that you're using for producing the worm compost. You talked about the feedstocks that you're using, the farm wastes and shredding those, and then using the coconut coir along with that. But you mentioned this tool, the worm wigwam, and I'm familiar with these because I happen to have one on my farm during the last few years that I was farming, and I failed with the worm wigwam. But I'd like it if you could tell us, like, what is a worm wigwam and what does it look like and how does it work, and why that over another system for vermicomposting?
It's a flow through worm composting system, as opposed to a kind of a closed bin system. And so the idea is that you're adding your feedstock to the top, and the worms are always kind of rising to the top to feed on that new material. And over time, the finished castings are going to go to the bottom. And the nice feature of the worm wigwam is it has a chamber on the bottom that is accessible just through a panel that you take off. And that's where your finished worm castings are going to end up. And it's got a winch with just a handle that you turn, and it literally just shaves off the finished worm compost out the bottom. And it's a really well designed unit. They have more expensive units that you can get where they have like a electrical winch that'll shave all the worm castings for you. They're a lot more expensive. They take up a lot more space. And I like these worm wigwams because, I only have one now, but I'm going to be buying a new one shortly, and maybe even two. And I'm getting a lot of worm castings, like I said, about 50 to 60 pounds per week. You do need to really know the ins and outs of worm composting. There's certain things that you don't want to feed them. When you establish your worm population in the beginning, unless you can buy enough worms, and, we have the limitation in Hawaii, we can't import worms from the mainland. So we have to, either buy them from someone or you got to get your own worms. And that's exactly what I did. In the beginning, I just went around into, a pile of cut grass or something rotting, or actually one of the best things is in bananas when they rot after, you've cut your bananas down in the core. There's going to be a whole bunch of worms on the inside because all that material on the inside is rotting, and it's moist. It's the perfect environment for them. So I would go and open these cores of cut banana, I guess the stalk, the main stem of the plant, and there was just pounds of worms inside. So I went around and collected as much as I could. You know, even palms. If you go underneath like a dead palm frond, you'll find underneath as that rots, there's a whole bunch of worms inside there that I don't. It's amazing they can do this. They somehow climb up the palm tree and they live in there. And so you could open them up, and then I'd find a bunch of worms in there. And so I went around and collected as many worms as I could, for maybe like a month or two, and kept on adding them to my worm wigwam. And one big thing to be careful of is you never want to overfeed them too much in the beginning. And a lot of people make that mistake because if it overheats, they'll leave. They'll let you know that this isn't working out for them, because if you put too much material in there and there's too much thermal heat, they just can't breathe. So they will exit your system. So you kind of have to start out kind of slow and then incrementally add more feedstock as they're able to process that material. And even in the instructions it says it's going to take about 5 months before you can start harvesting your worm castings from the worm wigwam, because you have to build those layers up, and the population has to build where you've got it near the top of the unit. And so at the bottom, if you've done it right, you can start harvesting your finished castings on the bottom. But you got to be careful what you feed them. You don't want to feed them too much acidic items like orange peels or onions. Minimize or avoid completely. And I find that they like stuff shredded up because it kind of breaks a lot of the cellular walls of vegetable matter, or even like eggshells or whatnot. And it kind of blends everything up together. And the nice thing about the shredder unit is it's not going to make like a liquid. It just kind of shatters it into small bits. And those quickly become available for the worms to eat. But like, you wouldn't want to use a blender to make like a smoothie or something for your worms, because that's too much liquid and that's going to overheat and be too anaerobic. So there's definitely some finesse to it, to learning about it. It's probably more difficult than like traditional thermal compost. But if you can, once you learn how to do it and you have a good unit like the worm wigwam, it becomes really easy. I mean, honestly, like I spend maybe 10 minutes every other day, shredding and putting on my worm wigwam and adding some coconut coir, and then I'm done. It's really fast. So, you have to make sure your worm population is sufficient to handle the feedstock that you give it. And also, critically important is balancing your carbon to nitrogen ratio. So you want to make sure, you can even go put more carbon than nitrogen, more browns to greens than you might in like a thermal compost, because they need that aeration and that material that is going to balance out the high nitrogen, green matter that you feed to your worm bin. So keeping the balance of the carbon to nitrogen and not overfeeding them and having a sufficient worm population is, I would say, the key to making, a worm bin work. So it's, and I have, that's not the only worm bin. I actually have some garbage bins that I've converted into a worm bin, and they're actually working quite well, because I have material that I don't really want to feed to my worms or go to the seed starting mix or my high tunnel, and I'll use them on my fruit trees. And so I have these alternate kind of worm bins. And as long as you don't overdo it and you make sure there's enough carbon in it. And actually, it's interesting because they were originally like thermal compost bins, and the worms just found their way in from the outside, and they just traveled up there. And now if I go to and dig out to the material below, I mean, there's a really good worm population there. So when I do go to start a new worm wigwam, my idea is I'm going to sift through and pull this huge worm population out of these alternate worm bins, and I'll start my new worm bin with those worms to have a sufficient population to really get that going. Because the way I look at it is I cannot make enough of this stuff. I mean, it really is just an amazing fertility tool that, it just makes everything healthier. And, you know, I don't know if you've heard of Elaine Ingham and the Soil Food Web, but if you listen to some of the lectures, they'll show you, how to use a microscope and look at that worm compost, and you can see, the protozoa and even fungi, and if you have a powerful enough microscope, bacteria, and even some like fungal and bacterial feeding nematodes, and all those organisms, they're gonna make your soil just all the more healthier and cycle through nutrients and fend off diseases and pests. Every farm has like a whole, different, I guess, game changing things that improve their system to make their farm workers sustainable. But that's been a really big one, is the worm composting. It just, it's just a way to manage your waste and produce your own compost. And the more that I can produce, like I was saying, the less off farm inputs I have to buy. And so that really helps out your pocketbook when you don't have to buy all these off-farm input. I like a saying that Gabe Brown uses, is that he likes to sign the back of the check instead of the front of the check. Well, I think that's the way to go. I mean, the more you can produce your own inputs and stop writing checks for these expensive inputs, you're going to make your farm financially sustainable. And not only that, it's just, I guess, like from an ecological point of view, it's just nice to know you're recycling your waste and making it into, really the most valuable input, on the farm. So, because you got to control your costs. I mean, that is like, I think that's what we were talking about before, why a lot of people get disgruntled in like farming here, is that, and we're talking about the cost of farming in Hawaii, is just very, when you look at the cost of all that machinery and inputs, the cost of land, I mean, it turns off a lot of people, I think, because you got to be in the black somehow.
With that, Chad, we're going to turn to our lightning round right after we get a word from one more sponsor.
All right.
This lightning round, as well as perennial support for the Farmer to Farmer podcast, is brought to you by Vermont Compost Company, makers of Fort V and Fort Light potting mixes for organic growers since 1992. Founder and owner Carl Hammer got his start as an organic vegetable grower, where he learned that quality transplants really mattered, and that quality transplants come from quality potting soils. Just like the donkey in their logo, Vermont Compost Company potting soils aren't glitzy or glamorous. They're steadfast and consistent, stubbornly making certain that your transplants can get everything they need from a few cubic centimeters of soil. And part of that is exactly what Chad was talking about today. You really want a compost that is rich in diversity, rather than just a large quantity of somebody's waste products. Vermont Compost makes their compost from a wide array of feedstocks, selected for what they bring to the compost and to the potting soil made from it, rather than just taking what they can get or just using what they've got on the farm. And when good transplants can make such a huge difference in your farming system, why would you settle for anything but the best? VermontCompost.com. Hey, Chad, what's your favorite tool on the farm?
Yeah, I know I thought about this already, and I don't know if this applies, but I was going to go with my computer. That's something I just absolutely cannot live without when it comes to farming. I don't really have another tool that I like as much when it comes to I mean, just I've learned so much from the internet and like your podcast and a lot of other lectures and all that kind of thing. I would say that the computer has been the most beneficial tool for me, because I've been able to learn about, farming organically, about learning about soil biology, and about all the different tools and techniques. I've gotten so much out of like listening to like J.M. Fortier's lectures about market farming, like the Curtis Stone and the Urban Farmer. Um, so many other lectures. I think you interviewed him once, Bob Kennard. Learning just, I mean, really, really, just totally different thinking about farming. And I was talking about Gabe Brown. Just the ability with the internet and having so much information available to you, and being where I am, I'm thousands of miles away. I felt like I've been able to get almost like a college degree in organic farming from learning all this information, for free, basically. And I don't know I wouldn't be able to do what I do without having been exposed to all that diverse information, and kind of picking and choosing from, whether it be Elaine Ingham as the soil scientist, different farms and their techniques and tools, and trying to put all that together into a system that makes sense for your environment and situation. And just learning by example, and trying out a new technique, and before you make a big purchase on some implement or some machine or tool, just going to YouTube and seeing, what other people are using it for and what their experiences are. And, you can learn so much, I mean, just your podcast, listening to all these different other farmers and how they got started and how they found their markets. And, I think I could do without my tractors. I mean, I don't know what I do about mowing the lawn, but being no-till, I don't need a tractor. I could do without, a lot of my equipment, I think, temporarily at least, but it would be really hard to be without my computer. I mean, not only just for the information aspect to it, but when you put all your sales into a spreadsheet, it really helps you analyze what your most profitable crops are, so you can kind of eliminate the things that aren't profitable. And you just can't do that without a computer, and to keep all that information centralized, and being able to analyze that, and reflect on what your best sales are, and what your input costs are into that crop, and to make it profitable. So I have to have my computer. I mean, I use my computer more than I do my tractor by far. It is just, it's, I've learned so much, and I've decided to change my system of farming based upon what I've learned from other farmers, and other ways of thinking.
So, Chad, every farmer has made mistakes as they've grown their farm. What's the mistake that you made that you've learned the most from?
I think the mistake that a lot of farmers make is trying to do way too much all in the beginning, and getting disgruntled about it, and having crop failures from trying to do way too much. And I think having a CSA, and you want to please your customers with having a diverse set of vegetables in their baskets, that I think I spread myself way too thin in the beginning, and I made it a lot harder on myself than I needed to. That I would think that would be my biggest mistake, is just being too ambitious and trying to do, in the beginning I was doing like asparagus, and I was trying to do melon and all these different type of squashes, and and I felt like I was having some success. Some things would be successful and some things wouldn't. But, it was really stressful just, having just so much space with so many different things. And, I think that was just really, really problematic because, with the CSA, it's hard to analyze the financials of each crop because everything gets thrown into a basket. That which is kind of one reason why I moved away from the CSA. But I guess I would put it that just trying to do way too much in the beginning. We had egg layers too in the beginning. I nixed that because that became not very profitable and just too much work. And so I think I got a little bit burnt out from time to time by just trying to do way too many crops and offering too many things. And that hurt my financials because I was buying all this different seed, and then you're putting the inputs into all these different diverse crops, and it's really hard to make the numbers work when you're doing too much. I mean, I would say that's one of the biggest mistakes I made, was just being too ambitious and trying to do too much.
And what's your favorite crop to grow?
My number one crop favorite to grow is definitely basil. It's in terms of the labor, it's really, really by far the most profitable crop for me. I love the aroma, when I'm processing it. I actually don't really eat that much basil myself, but I might put some in soups or flavor some things with it, but I'm not a big pesto person, but I love the aroma. I love it's just a beautiful, luscious crop that, it's a fresh crop that, you can't really, it's hard to import basil. So I've been able to establish a good market for that. One problem is you get the basil downy mildew, but I've been able to find ways to avoid that. And, I always cycle through and do new plantings. So I constantly have a replacement up ahead. And, with our humidity here, it can be a problem, but I've been able to circumvent that through healthy growing practices, the soil biology.
Finally, if you could go back in time and tell your beginning farmer self one thing, what would it be?
I would say keep it simple and focus on quality over quantity. You can't really focus in on quality if you're growing too many different things, or at least my experience has been that you can't, if you're growing too many different crops, it's really hard to focus in and really develop a very high quality product. And so I would say keep it simple and really kind of hyper focus in on the quality over quantity. And then once you've found your winner, and for me that was been like the basil and the Salanova lettuce. And then, I've been able to scale up on those crops that are winners because I've managed to develop, a threshold of quality that is very marketable and profitable. So I guess that would be the number one thing, is focus on quality over quantity and keep it simple.
Chad, thank you so much for being part of the Farmer to Farmer podcast today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Chris. It's been my pleasure. If you ever come out to the Big Island, you have to come for a visit, and love to have you out here. And I really enjoy your show. I've learned a lot from it, and keep it going.
Thank you so much. All right, so wrapping things up here, I'll say again that this is episode 130 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast. You can find the notes for the show at farmertofarmerpodcast.com by looking on the episodes page or just searching for Wasserman. That's Wasserman. What does that mean? Find the notes for this show. I take all the links for tools that guests mention, try to get a summary up there. We got links to the transcripts. So the transcripts for this episode is brought to you by Earth Tools, offering the most complete selection of walk-behind farming equipment and high-quality garden tools in North America. And by Rock Dust Local, the first company in North America specializing in local sourcing and delivery of the best rock dust and biochar for organic farming. and by Local Food Marketplace, providing an integrated, scalable solution for farms and food hubs to process customer orders, including online ordering, harvesting, packing, delivery, invoicing, and payment processing. Additional funding for transcripts is provided by North Central SARE, providing grants and education to advance innovations in sustainable agriculture. You can get the show notes for every Farmer to Farmer podcast right in your email inbox by signing up for my email newsletter at farmertofarmerpodcast.com. Also, please head over to iTunes, leave us a review if you enjoy the show, talk to us in the show notes, tell your friends on Facebook. We're at Purple Pitchfork on Facebook. And hey, when you talk to our sponsors, please let them know how much you appreciate their support of a resource you value. You can support the show by going to farmertofarmerpodcast.com/donate. I'm working to make the best farming podcast in the world, and you can help. Finally, please let me know who you would like to hear from on the show through the suggestions form at farmertofarmerpodcast.com. I'll do my best to get them on the show. Thank you for listening. Be safe out there and keep the tractor running.